Hi, what's up? I'm Quality Brews. Welcome. This is my new channel. Uh, this is a Magic channel. Gonna explore some decks I built, and if you have any suggestions for decks, you can suggest those in the comments. First deck today going to be Teval and Gyruda. Teval, the Balanced Scale, is going to be the commander. It's a 4-mana 4/4 Legendary Spirit Dragon, fly. When it attacks, mill 3 cards, and then you may return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And then whenever one more cards leave your graveyard, you make a 2/2. And its best friend, and sometimes lover, Gyruda, Doom of Deaths. It has companion, so we're going to be running companion in this deck, and the starting deck can contain only cards with even converted mana costs. It's a 6-mana 6/6 with when it enters, each player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard, and you put a creature card with an even mana cost from among those cards onto the battlefield under your control. The plan: mill a bunch of cards, reanimate creatures, and have explosive turns. So those were the kind of 3 core tenets I set out with this deck. I wanted to have a deck that could pop off. I wanted a deck with some self-mill, and I wanted to be able to get some big threats onto the board fairly easily. Now, I also has a few things I wanted to avoid when I built this deck. I didn't want to do Thassa's Oracle, even though it's even mana cost, so I could use it. And I didn't want to use any cards over $50. And I didn't want any non-telegraphed win out of nowhere wins. I wanted all of the wins in the deck to have at least like 1 turn of setup. And also, this deck runs 0 game changers. That wasn't an issue with the attention, but it works like that, so it does do that. It's not 2 on a power level scale, but it's got no game changers in it. Now the commander. As I said, Teval's a 4-mana 4/4. It is in Sultai colors, which means black, green, blue, and that means I have access to a lot of graveyard shenanigans. It's also a source of self-mill, so it mills 3 each turn, and it is a mill payoff, which means it gets me a 2/2 whenever a card leaves the graveyard, which means I'm getting something out of all the milling. It's also ramp, which this deck doesn't necessarily need, but it is very helpful, especially with the late game big threats that we're going to be pumping out. It's also not too strong or scary. When you sit down at the table and you see a Teval deck across from you, you're not going, ooh, oh no, better bring out my big threat deck. Gonna kill all the threats. Target him early. You go, oh, new commander. Cool. It's also an even mana cost, which is going to be pretty important for Gyruda. As I said, Gyruda is a companion that requires even mana cost, which is something we can do pretty easily. It wasn't too hard to find the same exact cards I needed with even mana costs. Only real card that I wanted to include but cut were Reanimate and Laboratory Maniac. Other than that, it's fairly easy restriction. It's also a big payoff. Reanimating creatures and milling 4 are big benefits for this deck. And it's any creature in our deck, and potentially even creatures in our opponent's decks, which is always nice. So this deck, like a lot of Gyruda decks, is running a large number of clones. Clones with Gyruda can combo and lead to a chaining of clones. And it can be kind of something that a lot of people go kind of, oh, Gyruda decks are all kind of the same. But I want to avoid running too many clones. It's still 11 clones, which is a lot. I hear you on that. But I wanted to make enough situations where choosing Gyruda for the clone wasn't always the best choice. I'm not running Thassa's Oracle, so the empty library as a win con is only working with 1 card in this deck. Most of what this deck wants to do is a lot of incremental mill, or a lot of turns where I mill a bunch of cards, and the next turn I reanimate a bunch of cards. So sometimes the best card that you want to clone with Gyruda, or the clones you get off Gyruda, is just a better creature. And also in my playtesting for this deck, I usually only hit 2 to 4 clones when I'm going through chains before I find something else I want to clone more. I also want the clones to not always be the best choice in this situation, so there's a good number of bombs. It's also 9 mana over 2 turns, so it's not like out of nowhere. You have to pay 3 mana on your turn 3, which you can do because it's even mana costs, so you pretty much skip your turn 3. And then your turn 6 is a big pop-off, or more realistically, your turn, like, 5, because you're going to do some ramp with Teval milling. So, I have a lot of cards in this deck that mill. This is the first category of cards in this deck. Everything in this deck mills. I mean, everything. Mesmeric Orb, to note, is the most expensive card in this deck. It's $42. It's cutting it a bit close to my price tag, but wanted to have a little fun with it. And I think Mesmeric Orb is a cool card. We're also running Deep Spawn, which is sick. Beginning of your upkeep, mill 2 cards or sacrifice Despawn, which means you know that card's good. And it's a 6/6 for 8. That's worth it. Who could pass that up? But yeah, literally every card in this deck has mill stapled onto it pretty much. Pretty much every card, yeah. For recursion, we like to follow the 3 R's in my house. Recast with cards like Kaga, where you can recast cards from your graveyard. Reanimate with cards like Animate Dead, which let you get back big creatures. Or recycle, getting cards back into your hand with cards like Tassiger. Ramp. There's a lot of ramp in this deck. We've got cards like Aftermath Analyst, which is pretty much one of the best ramp cards in this deck. On your turns 2 and 4, you can return a ton of land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, because this deck will mill a lot of lands. Circle of the Land Druid, same kind of idea. Get back the best land in your graveyard. And you've got Machine God's Effigy. It acts as a clone for Gyruda, and it's a mana rock. And then pretty much the best card in this deck, Insidious Roots. Creature tokens you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. Whenever 1 more creature cards leave your graveyard, you make it 0/1, and then put a Postman's counter on each plant you control. That amasses a big board quickly. It ramps you like crazy. You can drop down turn 2. It's just so great. And a lot of cards in this deck pay that off. And it combos really well with Teval. Interaction in this deck. Now here's one of the worst parts about this deck. There's not enough interaction. And by that I mean, I'm running 3 removal spells. Doomblade, Drown in Filth, and Soul Enervation. Soul Enervation? Who knows? Words are hard. But yeah, they're pretty bog standard removal. Sometimes they care about your graveyard. Soul Enervation is also a win con. But yeah, these kind of cards are not running enough of them. There's a lot of mill in this deck. There's not a lot of removal. But in theory, this deck should be popping off pretty early, so you shouldn't need a ton of removal. Bombs. 2 major bombs. 1, Colossal Gravereaver. Potentially the best or second best card in this deck. When it enters or attacks, mill 3 cards. Whenever 1 or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from your library, put 1 of them on the battlefield. This effectively turns every single card in your deck into Gyruda. It pops off crazy. If you're not chaining combos with Gyruda, you're chaining with Colossal Gravereaver, and it's the best clone target in the deck because it's non-legendary. It also can mill on attacks, like a ton of creatures in this deck. And overall, it's just a big, beefy body that is doing a lot of damage. Secondly, Lumra, Bellow of the Woods. When it enters, it mills 4 and then reanimates all of your lands from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, which is a major boon, especially for this deck. By the time you're getting Lumra out, you already have a ton of lands in your graveyard, so it's just setting you up perfectly for the next turn, and it gets huge really quickly. How do we win in this deck, you say? Well, this deck has 4 potential win cons other than just strict combat damage. Firstly, Mortal Kombat. It's a 4-mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if 20 or more creature cards in your graveyard, you win the game. It's fairly telegraphed, but it's still a fairly easy win con to achieve in this deck, especially with the sheer number of creatures we're running. I believe we're running 42 creatures in this deck, so you're really making a ton of damage. Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. This is our one fastest Oracle style effect, where if you draw from an empty library, you win the game. And this is very telegraphed, it's very easy to remove, so it keeps the deck feeling fair, which cards like Thassa's Oracle can make it feel like you're not fair. And it's a bit more satisfying to win with a card, especially if it's harder to reanimate. Thirdly, we can mill out our opponents. A lot of our mill is not necessarily targeted at ourselves. It could potentially be targeted at our opponents if they're already having a big graveyard. We've got cards like Glimpse of the Unthinkable, which just mill 10 from target player. And a lot of our mill, like the Mesmeric Orb earlier, is affecting everyone. So big graveyards are happening, so may as well fill our opponents too. And fourthly, incremental drain. Cards like Dreadhound and Soul Enervation can deal a lot of damage over the time, and if we reanimate a Dreadhound early, we can pretty much win the game with one major big pop-off from, say, like Gyruda. Overall thoughts. This deck is a lot of fun to pilot. I have not had it play in an actual game yet, so I haven't heard from opponents on what they think, but I can pretty safely say it wouldn't be very much fun to play against. That's the biggest issue with this deck. It needs more interaction, and it needs to be more fun to play against. Because right now, it takes 20-minute turns, and it can only win the game on half those turns. So I either need to pump this deck's power level up, or I need to pump it down. And I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments about what kind of things I can do on that level, and what the best ideas for this deck would be. The deck list will be in the description. I'd also like to thank Quips and Guac and Trinket Mage for being major inspirations for this channel. Those links should also be in the description. I just want to thank you all for watching, and hopefully I'll have another video out too.